Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's my pleasure today to be here with Jonathan Abboud, a very prominent person in the community, wears several hats, and made some news this week because he announced that he was running for California State Assembly. So we're going to talk about that and all the reasons why and get into a lot of local issues that Jonathan is really familiar about. How are you doing today, Jonathan?
I'm good. I got a great night of sleep. I'm well rested, and I'm going on the campaign trail.
That's great. You made big news this week because you announced you're the first candidate to come out and say, hey, I'm going to run for assembly. There's talk right now at the state level. They're redrawing the assembly, the Senate, the congressional boundaries. This is done in response to the census and the population. And it looks like we're going to get a Santa Barbara County with a little bit of San Luis Obispo assembly district, and that's pretty significant. That's a shakeup from what we had in the past, which was sort of like South Coast Santa Barbara and Ventura, and so it kind of opens doors for a lot of other potential possibilities. They haven't finalized the maps, but it looks like it's going in that direction, and it'll be done in a couple weeks or so. So Jonathan, tell us why you're running. Why do you want to take this on?
Yeah, thank you for asking me. And I think I'm going to stick to what I said in public because I think it is the most true statement I could say is what I wrote. And I really worked hard in getting my words correct to communicate to people. And it's just this. For over a decade, I've lived here now, and I've been a community leader for that entire time. Since the first month I was here, I've gotten involved in my community. And I've served in so many different areas, from education and housing and the environment and good government. So I'm passionate about the Central Coast. I want to make it a better place for everyone who lives here, people who work here, people who have a family here, if they want to own a business here, and including people who go to school here. And I think that my time as a community leader, I have gained so much experience and seen people from all walks of life and all kinds of involvement in the community. And I want to take that experience and that knowledge and apply it in the position of state assembly. I really want to work on us moving towards a brighter future and a united future as a county. I think that's one good thing about this new map is it's put Santa Barbara County together where we can now work within the county more effectively. I really believe in thoughtful and open and respectful communication. I think that's the key to getting things done, and I'm quite good at it. And I really would say I describe myself as energetic and selfless and responsible. And I really want to put people's issues first. It's really not about me. I'm doing this to help other people. And I want to tackle the issues that people feel most important and bring the experience and knowledge I have to those day-to-day issues in addressing them.
That's great, Jonathan. And I know that everyone who knows you and who talks about you just has great words to say about your energy, your enthusiasm, your commitment, your work ethic, and that has come through in your time in Santa Barbara and, Goleta and Isla Vista and the South Coast. What are some of the issues countywide that you think the assembly members should focus on? Obviously in the assembly, you're writing laws, for the state. So it's different than being, on the city council or being on the Santa Barbara City College Board of Trustees. What are some of the countywide issues you'd be focused on?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think that is an important and interesting part of the job is that you're writing legislation that applies to the state, but you still want to make sure that the legislation you push benefits the people here. And that's what I'm focused on is I'm going to be involved in the statewide issues, and I'm also going to be making sure that those statewide issues are reflected in our priorities. So I'll say the first issue why I'm running is education. That's why I got involved in politics at a young age. When I was in high school, I got involved in politics because of the issue of education. It was, 2008 when the Great Recession had started and the cuts were coming down on the public schools. That's where I got my start. And so I believe in fully funding our schools. I believe in funding them at the level that they need to be at to serve our communities. And I really, on the higher education front, that's where a lot of my experience has been. I believe that we need to return to the ideals of the 1960 master plan, which were access to all in California, a seat for everyone. It was the highest quality possible, and it was affordable to all, and they meant free, and it was tuition free to attend a public university back in the 1960s in California. I want to bring in another fourth pillar to that master plan, which would be equity. That was missing in 1960. It wasn't a focus, and I think that's another one where we need to be looking at. Here's a really tangible idea. I've always been a proponent of developing more universities and colleges. And since 1980, we built one UC and 22 prisons. That's wrong. That's a misinvestment of the state resources. Why don't we have a CSU in North County, CSU Santa Maria? It could be something the state, if they were planning and looking at the demographic and population changes, that's something that might have come up if the state was looking at higher education and doing that long range planning from the beginning, like we did in 1960. And that's something that I would go for. If I was elected to the state assembly representing this county, including Santa Maria, that's one area where it's a tangible change we can make, is bringing in CSU, California State University. It's an economic driver. I actually believe that the South Coast has been so prosperous because we had UCSB here since the 1940s and 50s. We've had UCSB here. It comes with its challenges, of course, having UCSB here. However, I do think the economic engine can't be discounted. And communities that have a California State University or a University of California campus do prosper. So that's me tying a statewide issue, which is our need to plan for higher education in the long term, like we used to do. So it's not like a new idea. We used to do this. The master plan was a 15-year plan. It led to the development of UC Davis and Irvine, Santa Cruz. We need to be looking at the same thing now, which is a 15-year higher education master plan. And I do 100% support returning to tuition-free college for California residents and expanding the amount of seats available for California residents at public higher education institutions. And that's something I've worked on since 2017. I've been part of a statewide coalition of student organizations, labor organizations, faculty groups that actually developed a plan and wrote a policy paper called the 66 Fix that at least tried to quantify and build out a way to get to that, to bring back the master plan ideals. That's not the only solution, but I think that the solution is doable, and it just takes someone who's going to be in the assembly prioritizing that issue year after year after year. And that's one thing that I commit to the voters, is if I'm elected, I will champion the issue of higher education in the assembly. I will be focused on it. I'll be working on it locally with all our stakeholders and in Sacramento to make sure that California really prioritizes education. We're still at the bottom of the country in funding K through 12. We're similarly low for higher education. Our per student funding is pretty low comparatively to other states. California used to be the #1 leader in the country on this, and I want to get us to be #1 again.
Okay, and I do want to talk to you about Santa Barbara City College and sort of your role in higher education on the board of trustees there in a second. I want to talk to you a little bit about the politics of this, Jonathan. Obviously, journalists have become pundits, and we overanalyze everything, and we create these narratives really early on that I know that some people like, some people don't like, but I want to sort of talk to you because as somebody who's covered politics here for a while in Santa Barbara County, you're out first, and that's great. There's going to be a primary. There's a lot of people interested in this contest, a lot of Democrats. Did you talk to people in the party? Did you talk about whether you were going to be the one candidate that they were going to support? Typically, the party wants to get behind their strongest candidate, because in a primary situation, as we saw 2 years ago, Charles Cole, comes out of the primary looking really strong. Democrats split votes and all of that. And I guess I just wanting to know, like, did you ask for anyone's permission to run? What is your approach when it comes to that?
I don't believe in asking for permission to run. I think that's something that keeps a lot of young people and people of color and women out of office, to ask for permission. There's the difference, though. You still want to discuss your intentions. You still want to be transparent about that. And I did call and let a lot of people know my thoughts and interests before I announced publicly. Of course, I wanted them to hear it from me first, and I didn't want them to hear it anywhere else. So I did make a lot of phone calls. I did have many meetings with folks before announcing, but it wasn't asking for permission. It was a collegial thing. I want to hear from you. I want you to know you're my peer. It's important that you know directly from me and that I hear what's important to you, and asking, not all these conversations could happen at the length I wanted them to. So making plans to meet again after Thanksgiving in December, and maybe after the maps are drawn. But I do have a lot of respect for everyone I serve with in elected office in Santa Barbara County. Everyone, I do have a lot of respect for them. And so I want to make sure that those are conversations I have. And it's the maps aren't final. There could, like I put in my email, we could come back to a situation where it's not a map I can run it. And that might change my decision in the future. If it's a map where I'm back with Assembly Member Steve Bennett, I've already said I will not run. And I communicated that to him and others before I made a public announcement. So I did speak to many people, and I am going to continue meeting and speaking with others, both in the party and people who aren't directly involved in the party. But I have a lot of respect for everyone, and I definitely made sure to let people know.
Yeah. Some of the names: Luis Reyes Martin, Greg Hart, just some of the ones that have come up as, they might run and they would be viable candidates. I guess the hardest question I'll ask you today, Jonathan, is this, but it's the one that people will ask me, and will ask you, is how can you overcome, for example, a Greg Hart who might run, who's got $400,000 in the bank and who's been on a ballot for 20 years and, is somebody who's very well regarded in the party. There's other candidates that are going to come forward. What is it about you that's going to be able to emerge as the choice among voters?
Yeah, like you said, we don't know who's actually going to run yet. And the two, Luz and Greg, I highly respect Luz and Greg. I've worked with them in the past. I know them. I would, if I wasn't running, I'd support them. And like I said, nothing is final. We are going to wait until the maps. I mean, not we. I am going to wait until the maps are out. But at this point, the campaign has started, and I do believe that what will bring me over the edge to victory in any scenario that I'm in. So whoever's running, I think what I bring to the table in terms of winning a campaign is my work ethic. Like we just mentioned, is I will work the hardest. I will go and speak to every voter possible and have that one-to-one conversation with them. If the voters choose that they don't want me as the assembly member, I am completely okay with that. Just like I was completely okay with it last time, because that's their power and that's their voice to be heard. But what I am committing to is that I'm going to spend as much possible campaign time that I have talking to voters one-on-one and hearing from them. And if that's a decision, and then it's up to them to make a decision. Do I like this person, or do they not, or do I not? But I think I want them to have that opportunity to at least know me.
Yeah, I have to say, I remember that day very clearly at the Faulkner Gallery in Santa Barbara at the library, when it was, I guess, the pre-endorsement vote for the Democratic Party. And there was a lot of buzz and energy around you that day in that room. And you got a lot of votes. No one candidate was able to get enough, I guess, delegates, or whatever the term is, to emerge with the early endorsement of the party. But there was a lot of excitement about you and your candidacy, and I think people really respect your energy and your work ethic. I want to ask you about that contest. What did you learn from that? Kathy Murillo wanted to run for assembly. She was the mayor. She was not successful, but she was a prominent name in that contest. There were other prominent names. What did you learn from that and having to sort of battle for that spot?
I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. I learned about, one thing I learned is my mom is an excellent campaigner. She really knows how to do it. I learned it from somewhere. Actually, she's right now working on a campaign of voter registration for Lebanon's elections. So,
Oh,
I did
okay.
learn it from somewhere. And I think the main thing I learned is all the different issues from the voters and their priorities and how they think about issues. I think that's so key, is not just what the issues are, but how someone thinks about them and how they prioritize them. And that's reflected in this campaign. What I'm running on now and how I've wanting to approach issues is directly based on everything I learned last time directly from people at the doors. You don't need polls. I mean, polls are good. They do have a place in a campaign, but I think the ultimate poll is the one that you do every day, door to door.
Mhm.
And that is what I learned. I mean, why focusing on the issues I'm focusing on is because those were the issues that at the door people raised time after time.
Let's talk a little bit about you, Jonathan. You're a young guy, okay? That's what people are going to see right away. People have compared you to sort of, like a young Doss Williams or something, when he arrived, like, wow, look at this great energy and this hard worker. So you've been around in the community a long time, but you're still a young guy around here, relatively speaking. So can you talk a little bit about your background and where you came from and how you got involved in politics?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, one thing I'll say is I am young. I'm 29 still. I'm in the early part of 29, which is actually the same age as most people in Santa Maria, which is a big part of this district. Santa Maria is a very young city. Average age, I believe, actually is exactly 29. It could be different now since the last time I checked. So I do match with a lot of the voters of the district in that sense. And also being young at 29, I also have 7 years of experience in elected office. I did run a tough race when I was 21, 22 to get elected. And so that's something that I think I bring to the table, where I do have a lot of energy and I do have a lot of experience. I have real experience in office in a tough situation. The City College Board has not been, a unanimous board. We've had difficult conversations and votes, and we've made a lot of good progress. I think I'm proud of the record I have there, but it was not smooth sailing. It wasn't, 7-0 votes on everything that I got done. So I really understand that challenge. And at this young age, having been now in office for 7 years. A little bit about myself, though, I do want to talk, before Santa Barbara City College in elected office. I was born in Los Angeles, in Glendale, and I grew up in mid-city, Los Angeles. My parents immigrated here from Lebanon in the 1980s, and there was a civil war happening there. They were fleeing civil war. My mom, when she got here, she went to a high school in LA. She got here when she was a teenager, and when it was my time to go to high school, this is something I talked a lot about in the last campaign. I'm almost repeating myself for like the millionth time, but she really believed that she wanted me to have the best possible future. She really cared about me. And she had gone to one high school in LAUSD and felt that high school did not prepare her to be successful. They didn't prioritize her future. And so she got me transferred to a different public high school, Culver City High School. And that really is what started me even having an analysis of politics, and to have that, wonder in my head, why does this have to be the case? Why is it that my neighbors here are at one quality level of school and I'm going and getting another quality? Actually, my neighbors also, their moms also got them permits to other school districts in the area. I wasn't the only one even on my block whose parents felt that they had to, and my whole block, I grew up on a block, almost everybody was an immigrant from somewhere. My best friend was from El Salvador. My other best friend was from Sierra Leone. Other friends were from Puerto Rico. I mean, everyone came from somewhere on my block. Everyone was in this melting pot, and our families were just trying to make it in this country. They were just trying to have a good life, and we were impacted by just the school in our neighborhood wasn't conducive to that. It wasn't going to help us get to that point. When I was in high school, I became very active in organizing. Like I said, it was when President Obama was elected president, when the global financial crisis started, when the Great Recession took off. So that was my experience as a young person, seeing all of that. And it got me extra motivated. It made me believe that this country, there's a lot of problems where, a global financial meltdown like that hurt so many people. My mom lost her job. Most people, so many people I know, they were really impacted by that. So that was another moment for me where I started seeing that some things would need to change. I got very involved in my community at the time. I've always been kind of, I'll tell a story and then people can draw their own conclusions. I ran for student body president when I was in junior high. I was not part of the political clique, so to speak, of people who would be up for that job. I did pretty well. I think I came in second or third place by a few votes. And after losing, what I did, instead of just, sitting out, I went and started a student union that was focused on organizing for change on campus. Because I felt, student government was focused on planning parties. I felt we needed to focus on policy reform for our school district that really impacted people on a day-to-day level. So, I lost the election. I said, that's fine. We're going to go at it still, and we're going to get these things done. And that's how I spent my last year in high school before I came here to Santa Barbara, was organizing. I had no formal training in organizing. I had, my teachers were advising me a bit, but that's where I first started cutting my teeth in fighting for change and getting something done. We had parents and the community and teachers and students, all united over these few different policy changes that we were working on at that district. So that's how I got to Santa Barbara, was having just finished that experience. And to be honest, I'll tell people this, it's no secret. When I moved to UCSB, I wanted to come here for 2 years, graduate as fast as I could, and, get out of here. I was really sad to leave my family. I'll say, I was very, and my friends in my neighborhood. But like I said, the first month I got to Santa Barbara, I got involved in my community. I started working on university policy issues and housing issues at UCSB. And that's really what drove my involvement. And I ended up becoming, it was a very difficult political battleground to get to this point, but I became a student body president at UC Santa Barbara with the belief that we really, and again, everyone in office at the time supported my opponent. I'll say that all the sitting student executive leaders unanimously endorsed my opponent. I still won the election. And the reason I was running then was because I really believed that the position needed to be used to its maximum potential and breadth. And we needed to do everything possible to fight for the student body in all the different areas. So I was working on a coalition for higher education, since we had just passed Prop 30 to stop the bleeding for cuts at universities and K through 12. Then I wanted to take it a step further and start building a coalition to fight for reinvestment. And I'm actually now part of that coalition, the Reclaim California Higher Education Coalition. I also went into that student body president position. We said we wanted to reform Isla Vista governance issues, and we didn't know exactly what we were going to do. But over that summer in 2014, someone told me, hey, have you heard about this thing called a community services district? You should look into it more. I've done a lot of research here. You should look at it. And I did. And then that's, now we're here. Now we have a community services district, even though everyone was telling me, don't waste your time as AS president working on that. It's an impossible goal to get a self-governance done in Isla Vista. Well, we did it. And it just took the dedication and effort. But it started off, I started working on that when I was student body president at UCSB. So those are some of, I think one other thing I'll tell people about myself, I don't think people know this too much. I have a business degree. That's my graduate degree was in technology management, a master's at UCSB. And so that was another thing that I think I bring to the table that's maybe different than maybe other candidates, is that I really have been trained and knowledgeable in modern business practices. My business degree is really focused on the idea of market validation and iteration and continuous improvement and how to use marketing correctly and creating a minimal viable product that you launch and then you iterate and improve on that. This is what I learned about in business school and at UCSB. And I think those are very, very important values, or very important, not values, very important skill set to be as a legislator, because it's the same thing as a bill. You know, what's the minimum viable product for this bill? Like, we want the best reform possible, but what can we get done here? And let's validate this idea. You know, a lot of times elected officials, myself included, I'll include myself in this, we sometimes think we have the solution. But I think sometimes solutions need to be validated. And that's something I really want to credit Assemblymember Doss Williams at the time, now county supervisor, is that's where I got a lot of my involvement right after graduating from UCSB, was working on Assembly Bill 3 that created the Isla Vista Community Services District. That was a bill that was written by the community, and I was involved in that process, but it was 40 people were involved in that process on a day in, day out basis. So I believe in that approach to legislation, where the ideas need to be validated by the people and them having real input in legislation. So I learned that was my first real experience right out of college. And I do want to mention this is, graduating from UCSB was I was leaving without a specific plan. I didn't have a plan to run for city college board. That I didn't, I'll admit, I didn't even know there were elections upcoming or that they had just made districts that included Isla Vista. I, of course, didn't know that. It was just over the summer. I was moving towards graduation, and people, this is hard to talk about. People are familiar with what happened in spring of 2014 in Isla Vista. And it drove my decision. The riot that happened in Deltopia and the shooting on May 23rd really changed my mind, and said I decided I was going to stay here in Isla Vista and work on this long shot idea to create self-governance. We didn't have huge buy-in at the time when I made that decision yet, but we didn't know what was going to happen or what it was going to look like. But I jumped into it, and it's been successful. And it wasn't an issue that people said it was impossible, but I did believe in it.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. That's quite an inspiring story of like making things happen, making something out of nothing, and overcoming initial outcomes that didn't go your way, and moving on from them, learning from them, and getting better. All the way from high school to UCSB, and then you create this new form of governance, which obviously has a huge role, and it's still developing, still growing, in Isla Vista. So that's quite impressive.
Yeah.
Let me just go right there then, since we're talking about Isla Vista and education and city college. Isla Vista, was it 20,000 people, the population or something?
Depends on how you count. The census designated place of Isla Vista, which is the box, is about 15,000, and then UCSB campus is another 10.
Okay. So there's a lot of people, right? And it's a community that for better, not better, worse, however way you want to blame, it's a community that for a long time was neglected. Okay. Yes. And you sort of see it when you go out there. So it's great that there's this level of governance now that's advocating for the people out there. We've had this controversial housing proposal that just came up with the architect resigning and Munger Hall, and these housing units that many of them don't have windows, trying to address UCSB's inability to provide enough housing for its students. They come up with this proposal, and there's a huge backlash. What's your take on this situation?
Yeah, well, I actually wrote my take in a very long article that I wrote a couple of weeks ago on, I think, the Friday before Halloween. My take is that the state is the blamed party here. The state is the responsible party that led to this problem. There's a couple different reasons. Let me explain. The first one is that the state has never made a direct investment in building student housing. That the state's always talking about how can we use our own land and how can we use our own resources to build housing, because we can't always control what's happening in the private market. So this is an area where the state has failed to provide housing for its workforce and its students. So all these universities, 23 CSUs, UC campuses, none of them, they've never been supported in a real way by the state in addressing that issue. There were things that were done, interest-free loans from the federal government back in the 1960s. Those programs definitely no longer exist. So I think the state is to blame for never having really invested in student housing. And then they do something that I think is very opposed at the ground level at the campuses, which is they drive something called unfunded growth, where they push new students onto the campuses, but do not fund the cost of those new students. So the state really has an interest in driving up enrollment. And I agree with the overall goal. Like, we do want more people to go to college, right? We do, and that's why we should build more campuses. If you build a CSU in Santa Maria, you might you might take on a lot of other students who might be in other communities. But we drive enrollment growth, and we do want more people to go to college, but they did not account for that enrollment growth. So they were telling UCSB, you need to grow, and they were forcing that growth on. It was not a choice from UCSB to grow or not. UCSB has no say in its growth. Legislators do. And they forced that growth and did not account for that growth in housing. So UCSB, I think, had their back between a rock and a hard place, where they were having all these new students and no real way to finance the housing. There's not also a lot of ways for colleges and universities to get the money to build new housing. I was actually on the student housing committee for the chancellor for a couple of years when I was a student, and really got a deep dive on these issues and how the debt limits work at UCSB and how they can finance projects with debt, and one thing they do is they raise the rents on future students to pay for that debt. So I think it was daft. I said this, it was very daft for them to bet their whole housing production on one project. It was not a good idea to do that. However, who was going to fund the project? Who was going to fund the student housing project? I mean, Charles Munger, I completely agree with his I completely disagree with his philosophy here, but he put up the 200 million. Why wouldn't the state put up 200 million and buy him out of the project at this point? So I do believe that UCSB must build housing. It's so important. UCSB building housing relieves the housing market for families in the area. 100%. That is exactly what would happen. By UCSB building enough housing for its students, it will make life better for other people in this area. People in Goleta, people in Santa Barbara, people in Isla Vista, families there will struggle less for housing. There'll be less of a competition with students who also need housing. But I think that at the end of the day, the state of California needs to step up and needs to get involved in the construction of student housing. And that's starting. This is the first year, 2021, where they had a hearing about it and allocated some funds. But I think what I would bring to this issue is that I'm someone who's been at the ground floor of student housing issues. I was a student housing resident. I was then on different groups and committees that were working on that. Now, as a city college trustee, we just discussed student housing on Thursday at our board meeting, and I'll talk to you about that separately. But I do bring in that experience on a direct level so that I could help the state assembly make better decisions on the future of student housing, because solving that issue is an educational issue. Actually, student housing is more of a cost for students than tuition. It's more expensive to house yourself while going to school than to pay the tuition. So it helps on that front, and it helps local communities. That's really, what we want to do. We want to reduce the impact that the state is having through its colleges and universities on low-income families who are also trying to rent in the area.
And I think that's a good point. A lot of people have this glamorized, romanticized understanding of the college experience at UCSB. oh, you're going to UCSB, and it's this great school and this environmental program that it's well known for, and so many of these other disciplines, and it's research, have fun. Well, UCSB is in Isla Vista, which is also the home of housing for a lot of low-income families historically over the years. And so when UCSB does not provide enough housing, what it ends up doing is driving out low-income families, largely Latino, with children, and that's a huge impact, right? That's not a romantic, glamorized, like, go get your degree, like, oh, go get your degree, and because we can afford higher rents, we're going to take up those rents and we're going to push these families out. And where do they go? Well, it's a cycle. It contributes to homelessness. It contributes to so many things.
Yes.
And just like where I live, there are UCSB students who are paying twice the market value for houses in our neighborhood. So imagine a family that can pay $4,000 a month, which is a lot, but for a nice, but imagine a family who can pull together two incomes. Yeah, we can afford $4,000 for rent, in this single family home. No, sorry, we're going to rent it to the UCSB students whose family can afford $8,000. That's not an exaggeration, Jonathan. That is happening, And so I think people need to understand that it isn't just, oh, just go get your degree and come out of here and you're off into the real world. You have to be socially responsible along the way, because this is a community. This is Isla Vista is a locals community. It's not just a UCSB student community. So it's great to see you thinking along those lines. What do you do with the Munger Hall proposal? How do you repackage that into something that works for housing, with windows?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me. I have some friends who are very adept at looking at affordable housing projects and thinking about them here in this community and in other communities. So I definitely have talked to those experts and heard from them already. There are things you can do. If you split up Munger Hall into two 1,500 person buildings and kind of redesigned it, you might not get all that housing built, but at least you could have windows in it. Mm-hmm. But I think it really takes someone who's bigger than Munger taking over the project. I mean, at this point, that's the only money that's even on the table for the project. And I think there needs to be another source of funds that can take on that project. And again, I do believe it's the state. Everything you said, Josh, was 100% true. I mean, that's happened in Isla Vista. Coronado Apartments in IV, that was all families. It got bought by Conquest Student Housing, which, what a name, Conquest. They evicted everyone, renovated it, and only moved in students. It is such a terrible trend. And it's, we can say UCSB, and that's a shorthand way of saying the state of California, because who is driving the enrollment? Who is demanding enrollment growth? And who's not? Where does the school get money from? Where does UCSB get money from? Tuition and the state. And those two sources of funds are never used on housing. It's always a 100% separated business at the university. So at all the campuses, not just UCSB. So I do believe that as an assembly member, that is something I will directly take responsibility for. I mean, it is so important to me that the state needs to take responsibility for its actions. And this is one direct area where the state was pushing one thing and not really addressing the full issue. And like you said, a lot of families have been hurt, and not just here.
Santa Barbara City College, it sounds like there was some housing talk you mentioned at a recent meeting. It's been lots of turnover there in executive leadership at the top. The pandemic has highlighted so many issues related to equity on that campus. We were having those conversations even before the pandemic. Tell me about what you're focused on right now as a trustee at Santa Barbara City College.
Yeah, well, I want to say two to three great accomplishments we got done this year that I think will move forward on this. So one is that I worked with my fellow trustee, Marcia Croninger, to pass a policy on on vaccination mandates. So that was able to get us back to in-person in a safe way and address equity, because without that vaccine mandate for COVID-19, it would have been continually difficult to have safe in-person classes or even to have enough in-person classes. So that was so important. And it was hard, just like most things I've worked on. We started it in April of 2021. It was vaccine mandates were a far-fetched issue back then. You were like, that's never going to happen. No one's going to be doing those. Even the federal government said that. But Marcia and I were really determined that this is the only way to get safely back, because that's the equity issue. A lot of our students do need that in-person instruction. We couldn't do it though without a vaccine mandate, and that mandate failed 2 to 3 times before finally getting approved. So again, I'm persistent, and it was the right thing to do, and we made it happen. Another thing,
but we would be remiss not to, mention that there was a lot of pushback against that, and a lot of criticisms among members of the faculty and others about that, right?
I actually would disagree, Josh. Actually, the Faculty Association and CSEA, our union, both strongly endorsed the mandate and were pushing hard for it. Mm-hmm. They were strong advocates of the mandate. I think some of the percentages were north of 70% in support.
So the failure and having to work at it a few times was just the board, or
the administration? The administration completely dropped the ball in rolling it out, and how they communicated to the board versus how they communicated to the on-campus members. There was no on-campus planning for what a mandate, no discussion. It kind of, Marcia and I had to get it on the agenda. We had to use our, both 2 trustees requesting it to get it on the agenda. So our administration wasn't focused on it. And that wasn't, this is the past. I don't want to get too into the past. Our new superintendent, she is fabulous. Dr. Kindred Murillo. She is such an intelligent person, such a strong leader, and she's knowledgeable about California community colleges and how they run and what they need. So we're in a really great spot now. The board, I'd say that's one of our top 5 decisions while I've been on the board, hiring as an interim Kindred Murillo as our superintendent. But yeah, the mandate, I really think the administration was at the time to blame at it being such a divisive issue. Obviously it was going to be divisive anyways, but the way it was handled, I think, made it even worse. And so, I stood with our employees and our students in supporting that. So that's the one thing is, we had to pass that to be able to get back to in person, to be able to equitably serve our students. There was no other way to do it. We weren't going to put people in harm's way, and possibly catch COVID-19 unvaccinated on campus. And that's not a thing we want to bring on someone on our campus. So I'm proud of that. Another thing that Marcia and I actually worked together on, Marcia and I have been, we worked on a few things this year together, is we passed a policy on employee-student relationships. It's the first one in the California community college system. And we had noticed that there had been a lot of issues with employees at Santa Barbara City College and students having, what I think are inappropriate sexual relationships. And there were policies on this at the University of California and at the CSU. And a lot of the students that were being taken advantage of were people from disadvantaged backgrounds sometimes. So passing that policy was really important to us. And that's something I'd want to take to the state level, is why is Santa Barbara City College now the only college that is protecting our students in this way, whereas the UC has already done this? So that's one I would take to the state level. Another, back to the equity issue, we had a retreat a couple of weeks ago, and it's already crystal clear. Most people already know that the colleges are disproportionately not helping students of color. Right? You don't need any real training to understand that. A lot of people who've been through the system understand that on a personal level. But we got the data, we got, everything looked at and analyzed, and it's just clear, we are not serving our Black, our Latino, and our Pacific Islander students anywhere near the same level we're serving others. And so that's one of my priorities now is that the McKinsey Scott gift, which was $20 million that we received, and the HERF money that we've received. We have about $10 million at City College right now in undesignated reserves. That's $30 million, Josh, that I think we really need to look at as a college and make strategic investments. And one thing that all the fellow trustees agreed with me on recently is for that McKinsey Scott donation. It's very nice to have a no strings attached donation, but we need to have our own strings for ourselves. We need to have accountability and measurement of goals, or else that money is going to be gone and nothing to save for it. So I really believe in having clear objectives for the use of all these funds that we have right now, $30 million that's up to our allocation. I don't think we should spend all of it. Of course, that would not be fiscally responsible. But what would be responsible is having a clear plan and objectives for all that money and getting spent in a way that actually helps people at our college.
Yeah, and the equity issue, I don't know what maybe the percentage, but certainly in the K through 12 and probably in higher education as well, having the faculty reflect the population. Santa Barbara City College is a largely Hispanic serving institution, and obviously you want the most qualified people teaching, but the most qualified people are also Hispanic and are also and I don't think it should be controversial, but as a teacher, the student in the classroom, when they see someone who looks like their uncle or their dad, or themselves,
it means
there's a little bit of a wow, I can do that too.
Yeah,
that happens. It's like a cultural thing, and I think that should be a goal, is to have the faculty more represent full-time faculty, and obviously I'm an adjunct there, so full disclosure, but there's so many, the college uses so many adjuncts. It'd be great to what is 70% adjuncts.
Many, yes.
Adjuncts are heroes, because we teach all these classes, we drive in and out. It's like we compete for parking. It's like you don't get the benefits, and all that. So maybe some of those issues can be addressed.
Well, let me actually talk about that, Josh. Thank you for bringing it up. So faculty and staff diversity and matching our student profile has also been an issue I've worked hard on at City College. It never even used to be an issue the board was concerned about. So the first thing I did, I also believe in, you have to build your victories up. So in 2016, the first thing I did was we got a new policy passed that said, at the very least, the board needs to hear a report on our diversity and how it relates to the student body once a year. That we never had looked at that before, if you can believe it. So we started doing that. So that report started showing the problems, year after year, and it also was incomplete data. But the one that just came out this past Thursday at our board meeting gave you the data in every which way you could imagine it. Part-times, credit, full-time, non-credit, full. We looked at every category of staff and every, compared to the students. And you're right, our college is not reflective of the diversity of our community. Even the part-times and the adjuncts. One thing I've supported and is a reform of our hiring practices. I mean, that's something that the board doesn't directly get involved in. It's an administrative issue, but it's where we support. But our hiring practices, I don't think, are conducive to having that diverse faculty and staff. And it's not just a feeling. You say that, you see that as your own experience, and that's totally true. But the studies clearly show that academic success does rise when students are being taught by people that look and like them or have a similar background as them. So it is good. It's a good practice. It's good education to do something like that. And I'm proud that I've been involved in this issue and that we're making real progress. Our new superintendent, again, I want to sing her praises nonstop. She understands this, and she did this already. At her past colleges that she's worked on, diversifying the employee base was her priority. And so I'm glad that she's bringing that experience here.
Great. Yeah, well, I could talk to you all day about Santa Barbara City College issues. We better stop there.
We can talk about that.
But yeah, no, this is a great conversation, and it's a real reminder of the diversity of your skill set, and being able to go from City College to UCSB and these regional issues, and then the background that you bring to it. So I really appreciate you taking the time to, talk about your candidacy, but also talk about the real issues every day that the community is dealing with and that you've tackled and that you've faced. I'm going to give you sort of the last word here before we leave, but just sort of, talk to people about who Jonathan Abboud is about, and what you want to what you want them to know about you as you start this huge effort.
I know. So, wow! I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the viewers and whoever might be watching today. Like I already kind of said this, but I want to emphasize it, which is, yes, I am a bit young. I'm 29, but I also bring 7 years of experience in elected office and 4 years of experience being the chief executive or the general manager of a community services district. So I've not just been on the board of a local government, I've actually also directly implemented I know how a government has to implement its progress and its projects. And I'll say that, again, I've said this already, but I really address the tough issues and I go after them, even after people tell me it's going to be impossible. When I ran in 2014 on student housing at City College, I was told it's impossible. This past Thursday, we applied for a feasibility study on student housing from the state, and I heard a majority of our board supportive of this idea. So it took me 7 years, but day in, day out, I made sure this is going to happen, and it is now happening. Same with creating the Isla Vista Community Services District. Obviously, it's not something I did on my own. No way, no how. However, I made a big life decision. I took a huge chance when I finished UCSB, and I said, I believe in this idea. I think it needs to happen. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to work on it. And it did happen. And say, if I get into the assembly, I'm going to take that there with me. People might tell me, hey, it's going to be impossible to return to tuition-free college for everybody in California, even though it's something our state did for 100 years. I might fail the first time. I'll get the bill in the next session and the next session, and we'll build that support and we'll get it done. And that applies to every other issue that the community brings to me. I'm a hard worker, and I don't believe in things being impossible. That's not a concept I agree with. I believe that what we believe we want done, we can get to being done. I want to just say, some of my record as well. At City College, I mentioned the vaccine mandate. I've also been very successful there in preventing layoffs. I think that's another major issue that we've made sure that we haven't laid people off at Santa Barbara City College over the years, and I've been a leader on the board in opposing that. I also want to
the board saved those positions about a year ago that were on the chopping block by the previous administration, and that's true. Yeah.
And that actually happened 2 years ago as well. In 2019, we were going to vote on layoffs, and we did. And it was a 4-3 vote, I believe, that ended up preventing them. So it wasn't close, but I was very strong on making that happen. And I have some fun facts about myself that people might want to know. I love to exercise and to work out, and I'm a member of the Goleta Valley Athletic Club. So whoever else is a member there, I'll see you there sometime. I love supporting our local businesses in our county. My favorite tortilla chips are made in Lompoc. I go to Shellhub for as my butcher shop. They raise sustainable meat there. I go to the Isla Vista Food Co-op to get my groceries and my produce. So I really love supporting the local businesses that I patron. And people sometimes think, are you a promoter? Are you writing ads for these places? No, I just really love them, and I love that. I would love for other people to know about them. I love to grill. It's one of my favorite activities on the weekend. Take time to grill, prepare food for the week, meet friends or family. That's something I love to do. I speak 3 languages. I speak Arabic and French, as well as English, of course. But that's something, my parents both speak Arabic and French, and something I've kept my life. And really, I think the beach is my favorite place to be. I've when I was in high school, I used to go to the beach every day after school. And now I live only a block away here in Isla Vista. And I think it's what I love most about Santa Barbara County is how beautiful it is at the beach. And it's something I take that love of the beach and it translates into my environmental policies and climate change. And, we didn't get to talk too much about that today. But again, it's something I care about. So those are just some things about me that people might want to know. And they would also probably want to know how hard of a worker I am and my experience and my accomplishments. So hopefully everybody can hear all this. And I'll give out my phone number. Right? Maybe we'll post that separately, but you can always email me at voteabboud@gmail.com. I really would love to talk to as many people as possible because that's what made the last campaign great, and that's what's going to make this one successful.
All right, Jonathan. Well, thanks a lot, and maybe we'll do this again after the primary. Have a
Let's do it.
conversation. Okay, Jonathan. Thanks for your time. Good luck to you.
Thank you.